Hello and welcome everybody to today's webinar, where we're going to be talking about indoor air quality monitoring in schools. So just to get things started, big thank you to everybody for participating today. I'm really excited to talk about this subject. Over the past couple of years throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a lot of schools struggling with the topic of indoor air quality monitoring and how they can improve their indoor environment. And so just very important, very excited to share a lot of those insights with everybody today. Quick self-introduction, my name is Liam Bates. I am the CEO and co-founder at Kaiterra. And here we've got a little brief agenda of what we are going to be talking about today. So, number one, we will go over the importance of monitoring indoor air quality in schools, what some of the specific concerns are, and some of the unique challenges. So schools are unlike most other environments in which we might be measuring the indoor air quality, and there's a lot of unique challenges here. So we'll go through some of those, try to understand how that can be turned into an actionable plan, and finally we've got some case studies at the end to share with everyone. So hopefully you will walk away with some new knowledge, and I hope this will be an informative webinar for everybody. Just a quick introduction to Kaiterra. We provide comprehensive services, so everything from hardware to software, analytics, to help buildings understand and ultimately improve indoor air quality. So we are focused on helping companies achieve low carbon, healthy buildings, which really means that we want buildings to work better for the people inside them, but also work better for the planet on which they are built. And air quality is really central to everything that we do. Because it is such an important part of us as humans. We're breathing all the time, but also such an important part of the built environment. At Kaiterra, we have customers and projects really all over the world. So our clients range from Fortune 100s, Fortune 500s, so commercial office spaces, but also retail, healthcare, medical. Our products are even used on several cruise ships and even by government agencies around the world to measure outdoor air quality, indoor air quality, and really help people make more educated decisions about the built environment and how to optimize it for the people inside. So jumping into the main topic today, clean air is really important. It's really important for absolutely everybody. It is of particular importance, I would say, in the school environment. And when we think of office spaces, when we think generally about air quality, there's short-term impacts, there's also long-term impacts. So short-term can be just feeling healthier, feeling more productive. If you've got too many people cramped in a small meeting room, it doesn't feel nice. You want to get out of that meeting. It's the same way in a school if you've got 30 children cramped into a tiny classroom and there's not enough fresh air coming in. Those children want to fall asleep. This is not an environment that's conducive to learning. The long-term health impacts are also really important around air quality. We'll talk about those more in a moment, but I think the important thing to know is that regardless of what the indoor environment is, there are really important short-term and long-term health impacts. And COVID-19 has really opened our eyes, I think, to a lot of this over the past couple of years. We saw a lot of mandatory closures, both in office buildings, but of course in schools as well, to try and prevent the spread of disease. And this is really a double-edged sword, as all of us have experienced. Stopping the spread of disease is incredibly important. At the same time, children not being able to go to school for multiple years is a really serious issue. There's been a lot of controversy around when schools should reopen, if schools should reopen. Is at-home learning the same as in the classroom? And a lot of us feel that in-person learning is a really, really important part of a holistic education. So if we are to reopen schools, this needs to be done in an intelligent way. And going forwards, we need to have better plans in place so that if there's another outbreak of some sort, if there's another disease, we have the infrastructure to mitigate the spread of disease without needing to go into full lockdown, full closures. There's a lot that we can do just by optimizing our indoor environment and our indoor air quality. Indoor levels of pollution can also be really high. So when we're talking about indoor air quality, there's a few different sort of aspects, which we'll get into in more detail in a moment. There's sort of the spread of disease and all the risks associated with that, but there is also there are a lot of other chemicals that are being given off within indoor environments. There are other pollutants such as particulate matter in the indoor environment, and quite often the indoor environments can be significantly more polluted than outdoors. Considering how much time we all spend indoors and how much time children spend in schools, especially in those young years when you're developing as a human, it's really important that we get this right. So what are some of the concerns around indoor air quality in schools? Well, we've got sort of three broad categories. Controlling airborne pollutants is really important, and there are many unique sources of airborne pollutants in schools. When we think of chemicals, there are things that you might not typically think of. Art and science supplies. There are bottles of paint. There might be paint thinner. In a science lab, there are going to be a number of chemicals. So really, you're in what might just be one building or a couple buildings, but within that, there are all sorts of sources of potential pollution that do not necessarily exist in the environments that sort of indoor environments that we typically think of. There's all these different things crammed into one small space, which is also full of children. So there's a lot of different variables at play here. And it's important to understand what some of those are in order to make the right decisions. So the second item here is really about managing the spread of disease and the spread of viruses. And this is, of course, an issue before COVID-19. This is just generally an issue in schools. We all know how fast the flu or anything else can spread throughout a school. And then from there, it can unfortunately often spread into the families of children. So it's really important that we optimize the indoor environment to minimize the spread of any virus. And if done right, this is actually a great opportunity because it provides us the chance to have a similar impact to closing down an entire school, but without actually doing that and without depriving children of the opportunity to learn or having this sort of lesser experience from trying to learn from home. And there's a wealth of information out there that goes into the effectiveness when it comes to reducing the spread of disease of having an effective HVAC system and policies in place. Really, having the correct solution to ventilate can do wonders. And the third item here is, of course, performance, comfort, health, and well-being of all of the occupants of a school. So we're not just talking about the children here. There are, of course, the staff, there are teachers, other staff within a school. And it's important that, especially considering this is an environment for learning, that we are optimizing for that outcome. There's no point having amazing teachers and being really focused on being results-driven and succeeding and learning if the environment itself is negatively impacting the learning ability of the people within it. So there is a lot of research around the positive impact on cognitive function of having an optimal indoor environment. There's a study co-authored by the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, which found that having an improved indoor environment can boost cognitive scores by, in certain instances, can double the cognitive performance when you're in an environment which is optimized for that. So there are a lot of reasons why you should try to optimize the indoor environment when it comes to air quality. That said, there are unique challenges in the school environment. So why is air quality in schools so bad? Because often it can really not be great. So there are several issues. Number one, schools are often old. The average school building is around 55 years old in the US. So architecture back then and now, extremely different. So there was a trend to really isolate the indoors from the outdoors, and there are some positive benefits to doing this. But at the same time, if there are any pollutants within the inside of the building, those aren't going anywhere. And unfortunately, within a school, especially when we look at pollutants like CO2, which are actually generated by humans within the space, within that building, we are constantly generating pollutants and generating compounds or things in the air that negatively affect us. So we want to make sure that we're not trapping those inside. If those are inside, we should be getting them outside. We should be bringing fresh air from the outside in. Unfortunately, that is not how most schools were built. There are also many unique challenges, such as the number of children. When we think of a classroom full of children, the density is significantly higher than most other indoor environments. So you can typically have 4 times as many people occupying the same space as compared to an office building. Again, when we think of CO2, VOCs, these are both parameters that are impacted by the occupants of the space. And when you've got 4 times more, clearly you are going to have a different outcome. And the second one, I touched upon this a little bit earlier briefly, which is that there are a wide variety of pollutant sources. So you can have pollution which is coming from the outside. You can also have pollution coming from the inside. So science labs, art supplies, all of these have the potential, especially if not handled correctly, if lids are not screwed on tightly, if bottles are not all closed, these will constantly be off-gassing. And glue is another example. When we think of art supplies, certainly, I know when I was in school, I spent a lot of time in the early years, gluing pieces of paper to cardboard and doing things like that. And that can give off a lot of chemicals into the space. At the same time, we also have, in some parts of the world, challenges with outdoor air pollution coming into the building. Finally, insufficient HVAC systems, and there can be a few different reasons for this. The system may just be old. If the school was built 55 years ago or even longer, the HVAC system was probably not designed to the requirements and the standards that we have today, or with the technology that we have today. Now, I'm sure it's hopefully been maintained over time, but as school budgets are reduced, maintenance costs are often one of the first things to get slashed, unfortunately. And the impact of that can be that filters are not changed on time, equipment is not maintained, and these all lead to negative outcomes when it comes to indoor air quality. And this one is one that I know that I have experienced. I remember when I was in high school, probably in 5th grade or so, the school ran out of space, and we put some temporary portable buildings into sort of one of the fields next to the school. And those were going to be there for 1 year, and so it was just a temporary classroom. And I think when I graduated high school, 7 years later or something, those were still there, and they had simply become a permanent part of the school. Now, of course, these were never designed with, there was no HVAC system within there. So looking back, I'm pretty sure that we had terrible levels of CO2. We probably had terrible levels of VOCs. No filtration, so if the air outside was not optimal, the air inside was definitely not being filtered. So this can be a very real problem for a lot of schools as the number of students expands, as the buildings need to rapidly expand. There may not be the proper precautions put in place. So these are a lot of unique challenges that don't typically exist in an office building, for example. So how can we handle this? How can we address some of those challenges? Create an actionable plan in order to effectively manage IAQ. Well, the first step is monitoring and understanding what the problem is. I think this is relatively straightforward. Whenever you want to solve a problem, personally, I am a very data-driven person. I think it is incredibly important if I'm going to tackle a problem and try to make improvements that I can understand what the problem is and I have metrics to quantify what the issue is. Being able to quantify where the problems are and what the sort of the most important problem areas are allows us to come up with more effective solutions. So step one is monitoring and understanding, then taking the insights that can come from that data and turn that into action. Finally, we can optimize, we can find trends, find patterns throughout the building, throughout the spaces, and then optimize accordingly. And finally, once we have an optimal indoor environment, then that's a really great opportunity to share that data with people and instill confidence. So let's go through each of these a little bit more deeply. So I've mentioned several indoor air quality parameters that can be of potential concern in schools. So just looking through some of these, PM 2.5, this is particulate matter, fine particles in the air that can get into our lungs, in fact, make it through the cell walls of our lungs into our bloodstream and have negative impacts, both short and long term. So these are really, really important. TVOC, this is total volatile organic compounds. These are essentially chemicals that are often given off by it could be the furniture in the room. So a newly renovated classroom, for example, where it's been recently painted, or where there's a whole bunch of new furniture and chairs, tables. All of these can have the potential for a negative impact. And certainly when we go back to those examples of science labs or art studios, this is one to really pay attention to. CO2, carbon dioxide, everyone is probably familiar with that. It's what we exhale all the time. And when you have 20, maybe even 30 children in a classroom that are all breathing heavily, you can get a lot of CO2 creation. CO2 has negative impacts on our cognitive function, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And of course, temperature and humidity. If you are freezing cold in a classroom or if you're way too hot, it is impossible to function effectively. So these are some of the parameters to measure. Once we have a picture of what's going on in space, then we can start to make the right decisions. I mentioned PM 2.5 a moment ago, just to give everybody a bit of a picture of what that actually means. PM 2.5 refers to particles, well, the technical definition is particles with an aerodynamic diameter smaller than 2.5 microns. That is extremely small. You can see a sheet of paper here, a strand of human hair, and on this scale here, PM 2.5 is really just a small dot. So these are incredibly small particles that can have a long-term negative health impact, especially to children with still developing lungs, but also have a short-term health impact. There's a 2019 study which was conducted by researchers from the University of Utah, and they found a statistically significant correlation between outdoor air pollution and school absences. So even a minor increase in outdoor PM 2.5 levels in the city of Salt Lake City was linked to increases in students being absent the following day. So that is really, really important. If outdoor air quality is poor, it will have an impact on how students feel and, of course, their ability to participate and learn. CO2 is, of course, as I mentioned, a concern in schools because there are so many children in such a small space quite often. And the impacts can be really dramatic and immediate. We all know that feeling of being in too many people in a closed space, typically in a conference room where there's too many people and you're having a really boring meeting and you feel like you want to go to sleep. And maybe it's because the meeting is boring, but quite often it's also because the space is not well ventilated. And it's the same thing in schools. If children are in a lesson and they're falling asleep and going, wow, this is really boring, maybe the material is boring, but there is certainly also the issue of elevated levels of CO2, which needs to be addressed. Okay, so once we have some of this data, then we can start to turn that into insight and action. So for example, when you can see throughout an entire school what the patterns are, what the trends are, then there is the opportunity to see what the root causes are. So for example, maybe certain classrooms, one specific floor, for example, has elevated levels of CO2 during a specific time. Now, in that situation, we can start to understand, okay, maybe in this part of the building we need to increase the ventilation rates. There are a number of different actions that might be taken based upon what exactly the problem is. Maybe the schedules in the building management system need to be adjusted so that ventilation is turned on or off at different times, or maybe some of the equipment should be upgraded. These are all insights that we can start to have. Or maybe there's no problem at all, and CO2 levels are great, right? So these are all insights that we can start to have once we have this data. If we look at PM 2.5, or particulate matter, there's the opportunity to correlate what's happening inside the building with what's going on outside. Start to see patterns there, and from that we can extract specific actions that can be taken, such as installing higher grade filters with a higher MERV rating, or adjusting the policies when it comes to how buildings are filtered. Maybe, for example, the HVAC system needs to be turned on slightly earlier to flush out the old air, let's say the stale air from the night, maybe 1 hour before children come into the space, rather than turning it on just 10 minutes before. So there are all sorts of insights like this that we can start to extract once we know, is the problem CO2? Is it PM 2.5? Is it building-wide? Is it isolated to a single floor or a single type of classroom or space? So this is all really important. And without this information, it's incredibly hard to make the right decision. Relative humidity is an important one. So relative humidity is very closely tied to the transmission efficacy of bacteria and viruses. So viruses can spread more easily through dry air. Very, very humid air is also not great. So it's about being in a good zone, usually roughly 40 to 60% relative humidity. And this will have a very positive impact on stopping the spread of viruses. At the same time, it just feels a lot better. No one can learn effectively if they are feeling uncomfortable. So again, being able to quantify this is the first step. So there are a few different ways to measure air quality. Traditionally, spot testing has been a method that is often used, where somebody comes in maybe once a year, takes a reading in certain different classrooms, and then a report is made. But this is really problematic because it only gives us a specific point in time. Imagine somebody taking a temperature reading in a building in the dead of winter and saying, well, the temperature looks fine. That does not mean that in summer the temperature will be okay, right? Because in winter you might have the heating on, but the question is, in summer when it's really hot outside, do you need air conditioning? So having a single reading is not at all sufficient, especially when spaces are used differently at different times of day, at different times of the year. So continuous monitoring is really the way to go here, where you can have a picture for every single minute of the day, 365 days a year, and you can start to monitor multiple spaces at the same time, and again, understand, is this a problem on a single floor, across an entire building, etc. So again, some of the advantages here: accurate and actionable data in real time. If there is a problem, you can find out about it right now, rather than 12 months later when the next spot check takes place and you find out that actually you've had poor air quality for the past 12 months. With alerts and notifications, you can find out what the problem is immediately and address it. Again, you have a more comprehensive representation of your space. You can identify long-term trends, and finally, you can do before and afters. So this is what I think the problem is. Okay, we are going to swap out some of the filters in the air handling units. Maybe we're going to change some of the policies around how certain spaces are used, and then we can measure 1 month afterwards what is the result. And that is really, really powerful because it makes it possible to improve on a very short time frame. So it's really important to use continuous monitoring to optimize your strategy in the long run, have continuous improvement, and identify some of those trends so that you can adjust dynamically rather than have one setting forever. And once you've made some of those changes, then it's a really great opportunity to instill confidence and show the occupants of the space, show the parents of children that we care about air quality. We care about creating a positive indoor environment, one that is, promotes and helps children learn rather than hindering them. And so having continuous monitoring, having reports that come out of that is really, really powerful. Parents are naturally concerned about their children and the environment that their children are in, and being able to say that we're doing the right thing, I think, is really important. So you can have live dashboards like you see in this slide here. You can also export reports, send that to stakeholders, etc. And this is just a great way to show your commitment to creating a healthy, productive, and inspiring space. So I'll just go through a few short examples of IAQ monitoring implemented in schools. So OCAD University, the Ontario College of Art and Design University, is a great example. It's a public university located in Toronto, Canada, and they recognized very early on that air quality and ventilation was a really core piece of the equation when it comes to reducing the risk of COVID-19 transmission. So they went through all of the strategies that were in place for ventilation, increased the filtration systems to be using MERV 13 filters, which is typically not what would be used in a space like this. They also installed portable, localized filtration purification units in areas that were not being sufficiently filtered. And they, based on the usage of different usage patterns in different areas of the building, there were also different policies put in place when it comes to the number of air exchanges. So again, going back to that example of art supplies, well, in a college of art and design, as you can imagine, there are a lot of studios, there are a lot of spaces that have the potential to have more fumes than you would have in your typical university or in other parts of the university. So by specifying which parts of the building needed to have a specific number of air exchanges, they were able to overall optimize the space. They're also conducting active monitoring throughout spaces on campus. So they are able to make sure that the different parts of the building that have different requirements are all getting the results that they need and meeting their minimum thresholds for acceptable indoor air quality. And so it's really interesting. There are different spaces throughout the campus have something like a 4x difference in air exchanges, the number of air exchanges based on the usage of that space. Another great example is the Pontifical Catholic University of Puerto Rico. And so they made a very significant investment around indoor air quality. So $1.4 million was invested on a new air quality system for all campus buildings and the admin offices. This was done in cooperation with SAG Engineering Group, and we're really excited to have had the opportunity to work together. So Kaiterra's monitoring solutions are installed throughout the university. They are helping to ensure that all spaces are meeting the standards, meeting the requirements, and that information is also being publicly displayed and communicated so that anybody can see what is the air quality right now, right here in this space. And a number of solutions were also installed to actively improve the indoor environment. This is across a variety of parameters from ozone, particulate matter, TVOC, CO2. So there are solutions being used to purify and clean the air. There are HEPA filters, carbon filters being used. Areas are using UV lighting, also bipolar ionization. And there's also a large volume of fresh air being pumped into the building to make sure that the air is correctly diluted throughout the space. So this has played a really big role in instilling confidence in the students so that they can come back as the university reopens and learn in person, because it is so different to sitting at home staring at your computer, staring at a Zoom meeting, and trying to pay attention remotely. I believe that it is really important to be able to learn in person, interact with people in person, and these investments have made that possible as early as was really feasible for this university. So very exciting, and we at Kaiterra are super honored and excited to have been able to play such a big role in this. Okay, so let's talk about some of the options that we have for measuring indoor air quality within schools. So what you see here are three separate Kaiterra products. So on the left we have the SenseEdge. This is a reset certified monitor, so certified for measuring indoor air quality. I'm sorry, it's been a really long day. Let's do that again. Okay, so let's talk about some of the options that we have for measuring indoor air quality and interpreting that data. So these are different solutions that we have here at Kaiterra. And on the left, you see the SenseEdge. This is an indoor air quality monitor. It is reset certified. And there is a touch screen, there is a display so that you can see your real-time readings. You can also look through the historical data directly on the device. And this is really great for showing what is going on within a space in real time. So in a classroom, for example, in a location where the teacher can see it, if the numbers start to go up and move into the red, maybe because CO2 levels are too high, it's an opportunity to open the windows, get some fresh air in, maybe open the door a bit more between classes. So this is a really great option to be able to respond in real time to changes in the indoor air quality. SenseEdge Mini, which is the device that you see in the center there, that is our device which is without a display, without a screen, more discreet, but still has all of these same great functionality as the SenseEdge. So both of these devices measure a wide variety of indoor air quality parameters. They have several options for power, several options for communication, so you can send that data to the cloud, to your building management system, and connect it directly to the ventilation system, etc. And so the SenseEdge Mini is a really great option if you want to have something which is a little bit more discreet and blends in, and that data is being managed by somebody else and not necessarily directly by the teacher in the classroom that is opening the window to let fresh air in. Often we'll see a combination of these two devices being used within different parts of the same building based upon different needs. And finally, how do you access this data? How do you get the most out of your data that's being collected by this hardware? That is using our enterprise dashboard. And so that is a web platform. It's a web app where you can log in, add your devices, manage them according to the building, the layout of the building, and view your real-time data, but also do a whole bunch of interesting things like export data, compare devices and zones in the building against each other, start to identify some of those patterns and those trends so that ultimately you can make more educated and data-driven decisions. So this combination is really key to understanding what's going on in the building and then making it better. And that brings us to the end of today's webinar. So thank you all for participating. If you'd like to learn more, you can book a demo with us, and one of the many experts on our team will be happy to walk you through the best option for your school or the project that you might be working on. And of course, please do subscribe to our newsletter. We send out a lot of relevant information about the IAQ industry, about the building industry, and we're always creating new content to help you better understand the world of IAQ. So hope you enjoyed this, and thank you very much for participating.